We can't hear. Can you speak up? Okay. איך זה להיות אסטרונאוט? How is it to be an astronaut and then to hear about what happened to Elon and his crew, the STS-107?
I think that all of the accidents that we've dealt with have been very traumatic for people involved in the space program. The Apollo 1 fire, the Challenger crew, and then, of course, the Columbia with Elon. It is an accepted fact in the space program that you're in a risky business, but that doesn't make it any easier when you lose people that are your friends. Every one of those two crews were friends of mine and friends of all of us in the astronaut office. And what it makes us want to do is go back, work harder, try harder to learn from our mistakes. If you go to the Johnson Space Center, you will see pictures of those three crews everywhere that we're working on those programs, in mission control, in the building where those simulators are, to remind us to do our very best every day because people's lives depend on it. But it's never easy.
The NASA budget was cut a few days ago. How do you think it affects future project, International Space Station, you?
Oh, that's a good question. That's the one area of... Did everyone hear the question? Did everyone hear the question?
I'll repeat the question. The question was how the... Excuse me? בעברית, אוקיי. שאלו איך הקיצוץ בתקציב של נאס"א משפיע על תוכנית החלל האמריקאית ועליה כאסטרונאוטית בפרט.
Being in the space program is one of the things I absolutely love. The one part of it that's very difficult, I think, for all of us is the politics and the funding. I think it's frustrating because we know that as people with technical backgrounds, we could be doing so much more. But unfortunately, you've got to deal with the realities of conflicting priorities, and that's just a reality. The reducing the budget, we would, for example, in our development of our commercial vehicle, we would like to pay for two of them so that you have two of them competing. It probably means that, you know, we would only be able to select one, even though we would like to do two. They definitely are funding the space station through 2024, so I don't think the space station is going to be affected, but I think the follow-on programs will be affected, and it just means they're going to take longer, which is frustrating for those of us who want to get on with going to Mars. But that's just the reality of things. But I think we will continue to make progress. I think going to Mars is going to be way too expensive of a proposition for any one nation to do, and it's going to have to be an international effort. So it's just going to take longer, but I'm totally confident that we will eventually make it beyond low Earth orbit, back to the moon and back to Mars, and to Mars, back to the moon, learn how to live, and then on to Mars. But that's my personal opinion, not a NASA opinion.
What? Will you fly to space again?
No, I'm a management astronaut now. I would love to. There's so many things to talk about. There isn't enough time to explore everything. After the Challenger accident, my husband and I decided we wanted to have our second child, and then I wound up taking a 7-year leave of absence to stay home with my daughters and raise them. And then I was actually assigned to my second flight, and I would have been the flight right after Challenger. I was about 6 weeks from flight when the Challenger accident happened. So after that, I had my second child, and I decided to stay home for 7 years with them. When I came back, I was chief of the space station branch as we were getting ready to figure out how we were going to operate the space station. And then I was going to get in line and fly again, and I was just getting ready to do that when the Columbia accident happened. So I guess I either have really good timing or really bad timing, but I love the space program. Going into space is like the frosting on the cake, but I love working on the space program. I love getting everything ready so that some of you in this room can go fly in space, and I'll be cheering for all of you just as much as myself going into space.
שאלות בנושא הניסויים אני רוצה. הניסויים שעבדתם עליהם. כן.
I flew on the flight I was talking about from November 8th to the 16th of 1984. And then, like I said, only once, because my second flight was right after, you know, I just told you all that. Can you pick another female?
עוד מישהו? עוד שאלות? כן, פה.
What's it like to come back into gravity?
Just give me 1 second. I was asked to translate the questions to you. השאלה הייתה איך זה לחזור לכוח הכבידה, לגרביטציה, כשחוזרים מהחלל, איך התחושות?
When you go into space, because you're no longer in a gravitational field, the fluid that is in your legs is brought into your central system, and then you get rid of it over a couple days. If you look at astronauts' faces, when they first go into orbit, they're real full and fat. It's really great for the older folks because it gets rid of all your wrinkles, but they unfortunately come back when you land. But so all those things that, and then when you're in space for a longer period of time, like 6 months, you actually start to lose muscle mass and bone density. So when you come back, and it doesn't take very long to adapt to weightlessness, I felt, like I mentioned, like an 800-pound gorilla. I felt very heavy. Just to move my arms was very difficult. And it took about 24 hours for that to go away to where I felt normal. For the folks that are up there on International Space Station for 6 months, it probably takes a good couple of months before they recover quickly to be able to jog and do normal things, but to recover the muscle mass and the bone mass is a longer process, and we have special trainers that work with them to help them regain that.
לא יהיה, רגע.
He's been wanting to.
כן, הבחורה שם מאחור.
I won't. We'll get him.
And him after that. תמתין, אתה אחרי זה. כן, מה השאלה?
Quiet.
How much time does it take for you in space to get used to the gravity, to microgravity?
How long does it? Going into orbit probably takes most people a couple of days. When you first get on orbit, approximately 50%, and I think it might even be more than that, of astronauts and cosmonauts have what's called space adaptation syndrome, which is like being seasick. The same symptoms, but the cause is different. And you feel sick, and I remember for about 3 days I wasn't hungry, I didn't want to eat anything. And on the 3rd day, all of a sudden it was all gone. I was hungry. The best thing the first food that I wanted was a hot dog. We had hot dogs on board. It was the best hot dog I ever had in my life. But, and after that, there's something that, and I don't know how to describe it, there's something that changes in your brain that you don't look at a three-dimensional space the same anymore. Like now, when I look around, I look at everything like that's up and down. But somewhere when you're on orbit, there's something that changes in your brain. And your down is wherever your feet are. If your feet are on that wall, that's down. And the whole space looks different. And that adaptation takes, I remember very clearly, that happened on the 4th day. And I've talked to some of my other astronaut colleagues, and they felt the same thing, that there's something that changes in the way you visualize space. And that's about like on the 4th day that you're on orbit.
Jonathan.
Finally, huh?
Wait, just wait a second, I'll translate really quickly. האם צריך להיות טייס בשביל להפוך להיות אסטרונאוט?
At the moment, there's two kinds of astronauts, and although this could change in the future, I tend to think that it won't, because, so you can take two pathways. You can decide to be a pilot astronaut, and currently, and I think in the future, the best way to do that is to join the military, whatever country you're in, learn to be a pilot, and become a test pilot, because that gives you the broadest experience to be selected. It's not necessary to be a test pilot, but to be competitive, you do. Then the other pathway is like what I chose. Well, I didn't choose, I just wound up being lucky to have been there. But it's to be a mission specialist. And you can really pursue any area you want. Astronomy, geology, oceanography, astronomy, whatever interests you, because you have to realize that to be an astronaut, you have to pass a very, very difficult physical. And it doesn't mean that, and you can have a medical condition like kidney stones or something like that, that can disqualify you. So you want to be doing something that you love, even if you're not an astronaut. And also remember, there's a lot of other careers in the space program that are not astronauts. But those are the two ways to become an astronaut. And then the other, for the next 10 years or so, I think probably knowing Russian, because at the moment, the only vehicle for humans to go into space is the Soyuz. And it's a hard language to learn. I'm studying Russian right now, and I can tell you that it's difficult. Pardon? Where do you make those decisions? Well,
Jonathan, we'll leave it up to you maybe, and we'll take another question, okay? עוד שאלות? Really? Yeah, the guy over there. Yes. כן, נכון. בטח. לא שומעת אותך, הם לא רוצים ש... כן.
Please be quiet, I can't hear.
כמה סוגים יש של כנפיים או של הפאץ' האישי? Okay, basically the question is about all the patches that you guys have. What kinds are there, and what kinds of patches? And you have the name patch, the flag patch.
Okay, that's a good question. First of all, this patch is Mach 25. Anyone who's wearing that patch, it means they've flown on the space shuttle and they've been in space. So if you see someone in a blue suit without the Mach 25, you know that they're a new astronaut that hasn't been in space yet. The patch, every crew gets to design their own patch. And that's one of the hardest things when you got to be like about the 130th shuttle flight, or now we're on Expedition 38. Coming up with a new patch is sometimes gets pretty challenging, so people try different shapes and everything. And then there's one other patch, and I don't have that patch. It's a 100-day patch, and it's for the people who've been on board the International Space Station. Once they pass that 100-day mark, they get a special patch. And then, of course, everybody wears the flag. You know, you saw the photo of Elon wearing the Israeli flag, and so you can tell which country each astronaut is from. Okay?
Last question, yes. What's up with eating chili and playing cards before the flight? She heard your yesterday's lecture and Rona's
Oh, you
tip.
heard Rona's, yeah. Well,
יש מסורת, just give me a second to translate. יש מסורת לאסטרונאוטים שהם אוכלים צ'ילי לפני הטיסה. צ'ילי זה מאכל מקסיקני שמלא בשוויץ. יפה, זה מה שאנחנו מנסים לברר. למה?
I think most pilots and most people in aviation have their little traditions and customs that they're superstitious about, that they want to bring good luck and safety for their flight. And some of these traditions started for the United States program way back in the Mercury and Apollo days and have been carried forward to the present. I actually don't remember the Chile one. What I remember was, and it also depends on who your bosses are at the time, you know. And so for example, when I was in quarantine, you had to watch Casablanca. We watched Casablanca, playing cards. Everybody played a hand of cards, and you wanted the commander to win before you left to launch. And so there's just all these different traditions. If you watch one of the Russian launches for a Soyuz launch, they have a very a blessing by the Russian Orthodox priest, which is really interesting, you know, when the U.S. astronauts are flying. So there's all these different things which just bring a little bit of, what's the word I'm looking for, non-technical fun as you're getting ready to go do this dangerous mission.
Okay, תודה רבה לכולם. Thank you so much, Dr. Fisher.